and welcome to this meeting of the Environmental Control Board. We have a pretty long agenda today, and I have some comments to make after the minutes of the last meeting are adopted. I assume everyone got a copy of the minutes of the last meeting, and unless anyone has any objections or corrections or additions, I'll ask for a motion to accept them. And I think it's pretty much unanimous. And they're accepted. Before we get going, I think since you are the Environmental Control Board, there's some stuff that you should be made aware of that's happening right now in the background and that is being worked through. I'm not sure how much of the history of how the Environmental Control Board was creation you're aware of, but it was created back in 1971. And the vision that existed at the time, I think, was quite different than what's going on right now as to what we're doing. I think that the thoughts at the time were, for example, that things that now go to our hearings were stuff that would be coming directly to the board as a whole, and we would be making decisions on daily quality of life stuff. That this was the generation that created things like the community boards and the school boards and the whole constellation of boards that exist in the city of New York. Most of us have no idea what they are or who they are or what they do, and many of them don't know who they are, what they are, or what they do either. History, as it has evolved over the last 40 years or so, has shown that what was envisioned in those starry-eyed days didn't quite reflect reality. As you also know, starting about 5 years ago, somebody found Ed Koch's memo of 1979, which said that all administrative tribunals in the city of New York were eventually going to be consolidated into oath. And the process was reignited. And the process, the way it was done was, I guess for expediency at the time, to get it done quickly, the Environmental Control Board was lobbed off from DEP with a rather blunt instrument. Taxi Tribunal was lobbed off from the TLC. The Health Tribunal was lobbed off from the Health Department. And by June, we will also be doing DEP, rather DEC, Department of Consumer Affairs hearings. But we will not be lobbing off their tribunal. We will just be absorbing the caseload. The point that I'm making is that as this has evolved, we now have four tribunals, four distinct tribunals with four distinct sets of procedures, policies, practices, physical locations, and so forth, which makes the city of New York, from the perspective of somebody who gets a summons one day from the Health Department and another day from the Sanitation Department, go crazy. The processes are different, the appeals processes are different, the deadline dates are different, the computer systems are different. They don't talk to each other very well. We have started a process of homogenizing, I call, these processes, so that eventually a citizen or anyone else who has to deal with a violation, or an alleged violation, I should say. I have a problem with the term notice of violation. I'll get into it in a minute. Has a uniform process, and they can expect the same type of appeals procedure and the same type of deadlines Same type of procedure if you fail to appear at a hearing and you need to get reopened. All of that process is the same, and it be accessed equally so that you can go to a hearing officer, and it doesn't matter whether you have a sanitation summons or a buildings department summons or a fire department summons or a police department summons. The process is going to be essentially the same, and the same hearing officer can deal with all your summonses. You don't have to make like a yo-yo, going from one place to another to deal with summonses that are all theoretically under one agency. The other little, and this is something that I've been here since November, and I'm catching up on a lot of this stuff, and speaking to people and getting feedback. And get a lot of feedback that says, for example, oh, the Environmental Control Board, they're horrible, they're terrible, they're this and that and the other thing. And I go like, what's horrible and terrible about it? Maybe I can do something about it. Well, they gave me a summons for this, and they gave me a summons for that, and the rules say I can't do this, and then they came back and they did that, and I said, Environmental Control Board didn't give you any summonses. Environmental Control Board is the tribunal that judges the summonses. If you've got an issue with a sanitation rule or buildings department rule or whomever rule of the 26 agencies that feed summonses to us in total, that is something that should be taken up with them. But they wind up today being other agencies with a nice cover of sending out a summons that says on top of it Environmental Control Board, and people think they're getting a summons from the Environmental Control Board. Somehow, though, when they get a summons from the police department that takes them to criminal court and it says criminal court on top of the summons, they don't think criminal court issued them the summons, but magically they think Environmental Control Board issued them the summons. So one of the things that we're doing, among other things, is working to make summonses uniform, and at the top of the summons will make it very clear who issued the summons. It'll very clearly say sanitation department as the agency or whatever. And which is another piece of the puzzle. There are an insane number of summons forms in the city of New York that come this way. We have been working very, very hard, and our general counsel has been working very hard in setting up a process where the summonses look as consistent as possible. So anybody getting a summons knows where to look at what in the summons to know what their rights are, what their responsibilities are, and what it is, and who's giving it to them, and what it's all about. And just as a point of example, and this doesn't really apply directly to ECB because it's on the taxi tribunal side. 25 years ago, TLC had two types of summonses: enforcement summons and administrative summons. Enforcement summonses were issued by tax inspectors on the street or at the inspection facility at Woodside. And an administrative summons was issued from TLC headquarters, generally in response to a consumer complaint. There's two different forms, basically the same thing. One was 8.5 by 11, and the other one was like standard little ticket form. Today, TLC issues 35 different types of summons. All right, and you multiply that by all the agencies, it gets kind of nuts. Apart from the fun we have with data processing. And some agencies send us the information regarding summonses electronically, which is its own challenge because we have computers having to have translating programs in between computers because, you know, one is an Apple, one is an IBM or whatever. That's not what they are, but I'm giving you that as an example. To talk to us, some of them give it to us on paper. The guys that give it to us on paper, after they get around to sending it to us, which may be a week or two after the summons is written, we have to send it to somebody else, a vendor who charges us a lot of money to do the data entry. Scan it, data entry, put it in our system. A lot of mistakes get introduced in that process, as you can imagine. particularly on how good somebody's handwriting was. That costs a fortune. But the problem there is, for the public, is that I got a ticket this morning. I go to an ECB hearing a few days later, and we have no idea what they're talking about. We can't help them, we can't process it, we can't even accept a guilty plea because we don't have it. So they walk away thinking ECB is a bunch of idiots. ECB gave me the summons. First they think it was an ECB summons, and then they think we don't know what summonses we gave out. We're working through a process to deal with that as well. And these are things that will be introduced as this year progresses. So I believe that you guys, since you're all on the board, should know about this stuff because you may be asked about it. Finally, you probably heard a lot of controversy in the press with people putting all kinds of spins on things lately about criminal court versus administrative hearings. Whether certain violations should go to administrative hearings or should go to criminal court. I can't say a whole lot about that right now because, frankly, there's a lot of discussion going on right now as to how to respond to those issues. There have been a lot of stories in the Daily News and New York Post about that. Some of it creating a misconception spin on some of these issues, and some being very straightforward and appropriate matters for general public debate as to what public policy should be in regard to some of this stuff. Just so that you know, and unfortunately because of the death in the family, Lieutenant Albano can't be here today, and I'm sure he'll acknowledge this. And the reason there is a member of the police department is a member of this board is because the police department does write summonses that are returnable to ECB, and they do, and it is a substantial number. Many of those things are stuff that have been covered in the press as criminal court stuff, but in the context of the number of summonses that we process, it's minuscule. We process about 700,000 summonses a year. The police department, we get about 3,000 a year. But the point is that it's not an alien concept. Along the lines of we process 700,000 summonses a year, there's one more point, and this is primarily directed to city agencies. And I want to make this very clear, just as I was very deadly serious when I talked about people trying to interfere with the impartiality and neutrality of hearing officers and ALJs. For historic reasons that I'll gladly talk to folks later on when there's time, many agencies see oath or the Environmental Control Board hearing process as a service operation. Like some people see the sanitation department. You produce a bunch of garbage, you give it to the sanitation department, and they'll process it and get rid of it, and it magically disappears over there somewhere. And I don't care what happens after that because that's the sanitation department's problem. Well, we have, of the 26 or so agencies that issue, that bring cases to oath, about 16 send them directly to the ECB tribunal. And it's not unique to the ECB tribunal from other agencies that basically see themselves as They see oath and ECB in particular as a summons processing thing. You know, like, for those of you who are lawyers here and may be aware, there's organizations like American Clerical. American Clerical is a private company that provides a service to attorneys. And the service is along the lines of, if you have certain things that are due in court on a particular day, papers that have to be filed or submitted, American Clerical, and I use American Clerical because that's the one I used to use, but there's like two others, and then this is not an endorsement of any particular company. That's the official disclaimer there, folks. They'll pick up the motions or whatever, or orders to show cause that you need filed the next morning in court. They'll pick them up, take them to court, and if necessary, they'll sit there through calendar call and stand up and go submit, and they submit it to the clerk. And at the end of the day, they'll pick up whatever is signed by the judge and deliver it to your office by 5:30. Very neat, very lovely. If the judge says, I want to take oral argument on this today on second call, then they'll call you at the office and say, you got to get your butt down here because the judge wants to have an oral hearing. Fine, and you do that. That is how a lot of agencies view us. They write summonses and they expect us to process them through like it was just clerical paperwork. And that may come from, maybe that's how they did it when these tribunals were in-house for some of them. I don't know. I frankly don't care. But we are an independent, neutral tribunal, and we are going to stick to that very jealously. We are not going to provide collateral services to agencies. Some agencies want us to have our hearing officers, for example, go into their computers and determine what the violation history is of a particular respondent. That is the function of the prosecutor. That is not the function of the judge or the function of the hearing officer. And that is being brought to a stop. And there's a lot of pushback from certain agencies. And that's just too bad. My marching orders when I got appointed to this job by the mayor of the city of New York was to protect the integrity of the system. That's what I'm going to do. And it's going to be done very harshly if necessary. Most agencies understand that, particularly those, and I hate to sound elitist, that are run by lawyers. They get it right away. They understand that the adjudicatory process has to be neutral. Some can't wrap their brains around it. They simply can't. To them it's just a bureaucratic function. You know, that's just another step in the chain. And those will eventually be brought around. I do not want at the end of the exercise to be, for this entity to be perceived as some sort of de facto tax operation. We're not the sheriff of Nottingham, all right? And if anybody doesn't know who the sheriff of Nottingham is, I suggest you go and read about Robin Hood. Nor am I Robin Hood either. If the purpose of, and this may come up in the context of some of the stuff we'll be discussing today, the purpose of a fine or penalty is to change unacceptable behavior. It is not to raise revenue. And we will be, as much as possible, divorcing our processes from revenue as possible. And if that isn't working as far as changing inappropriate behavior, then it is for the enforcement agency to figure out how to do it better, not for us. Someone had suggested that I come up with suggestions for enforcement agencies how to do it better. I am certainly capable of doing that. It is totally inappropriate for me to do that, because I would be then telling the enforcement agency how to do their job. And my job is not to tell them how to do their job. My job is to adjudicate whether the cases that they bring before the various tribunals are done fairly, impartially, and in a neutral manner. And some of them are having a lot of problem getting over the neutral part. But that's the way it is. So, that said, because you may get, after tomorrow, some questions from people you know, is where we're at. And to be continued. Is Amy here? Yes. Amy Slivka, Deputy Commissioner for ECB, is going to tell us all of the exciting things that have happened in the last quarter. Am I blocking anybody?
Okay, a lot of you have been through this before, but for those of you who are new here, what I'm going to be reporting on is the number of violations received by ECB, broken down by issuing agency, and a quarterly comparison of the violations received, the violations heard, and the decisions rendered. A look at the elapsed time from hearing to decision date, and a look at the decision results for each of the issuing agencies. Also, we'll look at the most commonly issued violations. So, again, let's see if I do this one. Okay, good. All right, so violations received by ECB for the first quarter of 2015. For DSNY, it's 93,071, which is an 8% decrease. DOB, it's 13,457, which is 5% increase. DOT is a 26% decrease, 7,277. FDNY, 6% increase. DEP, 14% increase. DOHMH is a 33% decrease to 44,590. And Department of Parks and Recreation is a 39% decrease to 740. NYPD was a 46% decrease to 2,268. DUIP was a 29% decrease to 240, and BIC 43% decrease, 30 to 7 to 4, looks like. And landmarks, it was a 29% increase from 42 to 54. A lot of this could be weather related. We're dealing with the first quarter. Weather wasn't so great the first quarter.
Well, historically, when weather is bad, people are nicer for some reason.
Right, or they can't get out to issue the violations. So.
Well, fewer people get shot too.
So, okay, and comparing first quarter 2014 with first quarter 2015, you can see for DSNY, there actually is a 19% increase. For DOB, it's an 18% increase. FDNY actually is a 10% decrease. DOT is a 7% decrease. DOHMH is a 3% increase. DEP is a 19% increase. NYPD is 4,726 to 2,268. It's a 52% decrease, but that was there's been a controversial time, so I think that has to do with some of the decrease. Department of Parks and Recreation is a 45% decrease. Again, I think that's weather related, 1,356 to 740. DUIT is a 6% decrease. Landmarks is from 61 to 54 to 11% decrease. BIC from 84 to 50% decrease. Agency code missing, 133 to 104 to 22% decrease. And miscellaneous from 24 to 62, that actually went up, and it's 158. Overall, though, it's been a 10% increase from the violations received in the first quarter of 2014 to the first quarter of 2015. So for the total violations heard, quarterly comparison again, 2014, first quarter, 2015, first quarter. So DSNY, you can see it went up 16%. DOB went up 1%. FDNY actually went down to 8%. DEP went down 2%. DOHMH went up 2%. DOT went up 27% from 1,889 to 2,408. NYPD obviously went down 49%, 3,976 to 2,042. DeWitt went down 909 to 456%. Department of Parks and Recreation is down 49%. Landmarks is up 69%. BIC 1 to 8, it went up 700%. Whoa. Agency code missing is down 45%, and miscellaneous is down 27%. But basically, the violations heard like 0% difference, 44,502 to 44,392. Okay, and decisions rendered, quarterly comparison, well, DSNY is up 26%, 11,091 to 13,933. DOB is up 22%, FDNY is up 2%, DOHMH is up 5%, DEP is up 10%, 1,937 to 2,127. Again, NYP down 2,905 to 1,840, it's 37% decrease. DOT is up 36%, Department of Parks is down 38%, DeWitt is down 53%, 244 to 114. Landmarks is up 100% from 9 to 18. Again, BIC, winner, 1 to 5, 400% increase. And then agency code missing 38% down, and miscellaneous down 25%. But overall, the number of hearings, decisions rendered is up 12%. Okay, so here is the decision. First quarter, we're getting approximately 85% done in less than 10 days, and we're certainly getting 98% done in less than 20 days. So decisions rendered after hearings, this is the percentage of dismissals versus violations. So you have overall 60.2% are found in violation, 38.7 dismissed in 2014 first quarter. It's pretty much the same in 2015, 60.6% in violation, 38.6% dismissed. So I'm just kind of running this way. Okay, and broken down by agency, you can see that for DSNY, 57% are dismissed, 43% are in violation. For DOB, where the issuing agency is present, you have 78% in violation, 21% dismissed. And DOT, 60% in violation, 40% dismissed. FDNY, 90% in violation, 8% dismissed. DEP, 75% in violation, 15% dismissed, and you have 10% stiff. NYPD, you have 49% in violation, 51% dismissed. DOHMH, you got 58% in violation, 42% dismissed. Department of Parks, you got 56% in violation, 44% dismissed. DeWitt, 52% in violation, 48% dismissed. BEC, they're really doing well, 80% in violation, 20% dismissed. And Landmarks, you have 100% have been found in violation. So the most commonly issued violations that pretty much stay the same from quarter to quarter, year to year. DOT, it's opening the street without a permit, or failure to permanently restore your curb cut within the required time or your cut, failure to comply with the terms and conditions of the permit. NYPD, basically they're vendor violations, you're vending in a bus stop or next to a hospital, you fail to display your license or items mounted or under the cart, these are all vendor violations. DOB is failure to comply with an order of the commissioner, failure to comply with an order to file a certificate of correction, and then you have miscellaneous violations. DSNY will make sense this time of year, snow and ice is your number one, and dirt on sidewalks, and you have dirty sidewalk area, and then you have dirty area. DEP, you have failure to submit your annual test report for your backflow preventer, operating without renewing an expired operating certificate, failure to install a backflow preventer, FDNY inspection and testing, failure to conduct it, failure to, this is an unwarranted, unnecessary alarm, and failure to post permits and have record keeping. For DOH&H, it's failure to eliminate your rodents, shown by active rodent signs first, failure to eliminate conditions conducive to rodent, and failure to eliminate conditions conducive to pests, with garbage cans and spillage and such. For landmarks, basically, they're all kind of the same. It's work without having a certificate of approval or no certificate, for miscellaneous violations, for your flag signs and banners, and for architectural changes. And do it. It's failure to provide a working public pay telephone and operator service, failure to clean, maintain public pay telephone. Who uses these public pay telephones? And install, operate, maintain public pay, pay telephone without having a permit. For parks, it's unleashed or uncontrolled animals. It's failure to comply with directions or signs, and it's failure to comply with handicap restrictions. And for BIC, it's idling of your motor vehicles over 3 minutes and operating a wholesale operation without a registration. That's it. Okay?
I hate to throw you a question out of left field, but
On the spot.
where it says that the issuing agency is unknown or illegible, does the hearing, I'm assuming that's the data entry matter. Does the hearing officer know who is prosecuting that summons?
Not if the issuing agency, so there's a level where you put down the issuing agencies. For example, it'll say 836 is sanitation, for example, I can't think of another one. So if that's missing, we don't really know who issued it. But if the section of law is something we have jurisdiction over, we conduct a hearing on that. So that's where nothing is missing. Miscellaneous could be Peter Cooper Village Stuyvesant Town, so they don't fall within any of the categories, but they do have the right, they've been authorized by NYPD, for example, to issue Cooper Sewer. I happen to know because I live in Peter Cooper and they issue those violations. So that's a miscellaneous type of agency. So one's agency code missing and one's a miscellaneous agency.
Okay, pop quiz. How many people know that 836 is the sanitation department? The sanitation department knows. Okay, one person.
Go over there, we got two.
That goes back to what I was talking about before. People think they're getting their summonses, these summonses from the Environmental Control Board, and unless they're work for the particular agency and happen to know what their code is, or are some very intense nerd, they have no idea that.
I should know more of them, but you just caught me on the spot, so I can't think of them right away.
But I think you get my point.
Okay, thank you.
The Department of Health and Mental Hygiene has some proposed rules concerning water tank inspections and reporting.
Hi, I'm Chris Boyd. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Environmental Sciences and Engineering at the New York City Department of Health, and I'm with our council and the Director of Public Health and Engineering for questions. We're coming today before the board to request concurrence with allowing us to send violations for failure to inspect water tanks to ECB. So a little background, so you understand the purpose of the inspection process and the violations that will be issued. There are about 10,000 roof tanks in residential and commercial buildings in the city of New York. Generally, those are in buildings that are over 6 stories tall. Water pressure from the street can generally bring water to the 6th floor without any assistance. Above the 6th floor, depending on where you are in the city, you need a water tank or a pump. So the requirement is for an inspection of drinking water tanks. That can be a combined tank, both where some of the water is used for firefighting purposes, some of the water is used only for drinking water. So the public health concern is the prevention of waterborne illness due to contamination of the water tank and failure of structural integrity of the water tank that presents a risk of the water tank, as in the picture, falls off the roof. So we are concerned about sediment, biological growth, floatable debris that gets into the tank, harborage, if there's openings, rodent and bird activity in and around the tank. Right now, building owners are required to annually conduct an inspection of the interior and exterior of the tank. They need to sample the water to verify that it's meeting water quality standards, and they need to repair and clean the tank as needed. So, what does our inspection process look like? What are the requirements there? The City Council required the Department of Health to do an annual review. So we did about 100 spot inspections. There isn't an active inspection program prior to that point. It was in response to complaint. The results of that survey, that kind of audit process that continues today, found that most of the buildings failed to post their notice to the public, that they are able to review and confirm that water tank inspections occurred. And we found 27% of the buildings in non-compliance with their annual inspection requirements. 58% had failed to take the required sample. And the vast majority were not posting the notice to the public at 73%. Right now, the violations are returnable to the health tribunal, subject to financial penalties there. We're requesting to move those to ECB. So the owner is required to inspect the general conditions of the tank, the exterior, structural integrity, access ladders, piping, hatches, things like that, as well as the interior. So is there pitting, scaling, is there corrosion or rust that needs to be addressed? Is it going to create a risk in the future? And then there needs to be a sanitary inspection to identify actual potential sources of contamination, address those, drain the tank, clean it, restore it to good working condition, and then they're good to go. So we want to make sure that the activity that happens is done safely. The work has to be done by a licensed master plumber or someone who has a permit from the department, and there is supervision by a master plumber. And we have a few firms that have a permit, but the majority of the work is done by several water tank cleaning companies, and some of the buildings have a master plumber who does the work for them as well. So the enforcement process, there are record-keeping elements. So there's a verification of the public posting. They are required to keep record of the annual inspection for 5 years and make that available upon request by the department. Part of the problem is there isn't a proof of samples being taken. That's one of the record keeping requirements. So when we ask for proof that you took the sample to verify the water was safe, that's a challenge for some building owners. So in 2014, the Board of Health amended Article 141 of the Health Code to require owners annual reporting of the tank inspection. So previously, the requirement was for a building owner to maintain a record and present that record of inspection upon request. The health code was changed to make that a proactive requirement. Now building owners are required to submit proactively each year proof of an inspection. They're going to be doing that online through a web portal, or they're going to be submitting that in paper on a form developed by the department. And the proposed penalties range from 250 at initial violation, 500 for failure to appear in bond, and then 500 to 1,000, and 1,000 to 2,000 for the actual tank cleaning is the kind of range of the fines. And available for questions. Anybody have any questions?
Jorge Martinez, Department of Health. I just by way of background, the water tanks are so important. Why is it some buildings have water tanks and some do not? I'm wondering also if you can explain how does the water get into the water tank? Is it connected to the municipal city supply in some way? And why don't we just get rid of water tank? Why don't we require pumps? How to get there in the first place?
Yeah, so water tanks are filled with municipal water. So there's a connection between the water main in the street and a building. That water flows to the building. And then there's a pump that moves that water to the top of the building into the water tank. And then gravity supplies the pressure to the rest of the building. And some buildings do choose to install a series of staged pumps to bring water pressure to different floors. It's really a building by building kind of decision. Most of the historical buildings wouldn't be, you'd be asking 10,000 buildings to rejigger their internal plumbing systems. It would be a gargantuan thing to do, and we don't think that there would be any public health benefit from going one or the other. It's really a building owner decision in terms of how they'd like to manage that.
I have a more fundamental question.
Sure.
You said these violations are now returnable to the health tribunal?
Yes.
You do realize that by the end of this year, there's not going to be any difference between the health tribunal and the ECB tribunal. So what is all this about? It doesn't make any sense.
So the decision to go to ECB was several-fold. ECB has the ability to generate automated violation.
We're going to stop that.
What?
We're going to stop that.
You're going to?
We will not be issuing violations on behalf of agencies anymore.
Well, we're not asking you to issue a violation on behalf of the agency. What happens is that there's a tracking number. There's a docket number that's created for the violation. The health tribunal doesn't have a mechanism to do that from an algorithm standpoint where ECB does.
By the end of this year, we'll be using one computer system across all the tribunals. I think somebody should have talked to us first, because I will oppose this.
Uh-huh.
Okay? Anything else?
So, there you go. Yes, ma'am.
Can I, Elizabeth Nauer, citizen member, I just was in terms of the violation penalties, are those the same penalties that are currently being imposed by the health department? I mean,
The tribunal doesn't have set penalties. There's not a set penalty schedule. It's determined by the hearing officer. So we provide recommended penalties for consideration, but the tribunal doesn't have a set penalty schedule. I'm assuming that's going to change as well.
Well, one of the problems with the process that exists at ECB is that agencies create the rules, and then we here at ECB, as a board in a vacuum, have to determine whether or not the proposed rule schedule makes any sense. And for us to do that with due diligence, we would essentially have to replicate, which we don't, the logic behind fine schedule. And in my view, that fine schedule should be appropriately done by the enforcement agency, the regulatory agency, as for example does the Tax and Limousine Commission. Tax and Limousine Commission has rules, and part of their rules creates a fine structure. And they are the individuals who are in best position to analyze and consider within their realm of public policy what is the appropriate fine structure to compel people in the industry that they regulate to abide by the rules. Part of what I was talking about earlier, which is that they see ECB as some kind of a service organization where agencies plop down on us proposed fine structures almost in a vacuum and expect us to rubber stamp them, which I think is totally inappropriate. For us to, for example, decide whether a $5,000 penalty for something is appropriate or not, the best entity that should be making that decision is those people who are working day to day in that industry, understand the complications of that industry, understand the financial structure of that industry, understand what kind of a fine or penalty or rule will have the desired effect on that industry, as opposed to us over here just making a gut determination that gee whiz, this is a really bad thing and $5,000 is appropriate for it. That sort of rulemaking really belongs on the regulatory entity. We are not a regulatory entity, or we are essentially an adjudicatory entity. The criminal court doesn't decide what the penalties are for under the penal law. That's done by the legislature. That's a public policy issue. My suggestion is that the rules specify what the penalties are, and that it stays at the health tribunal, which is far less complicated than the ECB tribunal, and particularly the appeals process, and more direct. And if the issue is one of relating to data entry, that's something that should have been brought to, frankly, my attention, and our IT people could work on it. But you can take this back to your agency that I will oppose moving any cases that are returnable to health, returnable to ECB, primarily because, among other things, by the end of this year, every hearing officer under oath will be hearing ECB cases, health cases, taxi cases, sanitation cases, whatever cases, interchangeably. We are now in the process of cross-training our hearing officers to do that. Somebody will eventually be able to walk into a hearing with a sanitation summons and with a health department summons and have one hearing officer adjudicate everything in one shot using one computer system.
So one of the advantages of us affecting this change now versus waiting for the potential integration of multiple boards into a unified data system that would provide the same level of capacity is that as we roll out this new enforcement program, building owners being required to submit 10,000 reports flowing into the department electronically, hopefully, and violation determinations being determined based on the data being supplied or not supplied by building owners. There will be an automated process by which to issue a violation for failure to report. Shifting and keeping that with the tribunal for the year, and then as IT projects go, they sometimes go a little farther than we anticipate, would result in the agency having to assume the clerical responsibility for individually generating a docket number for thousands potentially violations. So that would be a significant sort of administrative burden that we could address now. I understand that eventually all the systems will be integrated and there'll be an IT solution that would accommodate that. But in the interim, it would be efficient both in terms of how we process the violation, how the building owner gets notice in order to have that flow to ECB. And my assumption is that staff, upon seeing the draft of our proposal, shared that draft with folks internally. Is that assumption not true?
Apparently not.
Apparently not. Okay, so, you know, it's not coming out of the blue from our perspective that we've been planning to bring this to ECB for some time. That we've drafted regulations that come to ECB. We've had comments from ECB staff on the proposed rule and responded to those comments. So it is a little surprising to me to hear now that you feel that you've been blindsided by this proposal, which is on the agenda. So I think from an administrative standpoint, the proposal is solid. It serves the public purpose. It allows us to implement a new enforcement requirement that was adopted by the Board of Health and do that efficiently. We're rolling out the online portal to allow building owners to come into compliance and document their compliance routinely. That'll happen soon. And violations will start to come out February of 2016. And we anticipate that first round of violations will be around 2,000 violations.
And the new computer system, I expect, will be online in 3 months. So we got a lot of talking to do.
So in 3 months, the health tribunal is going to be able to generate an algorithm docket number?
We have to talk about this because I don't like this.
Okay.
I'll tell you that right now.
Can I ask a question about the actual the proposal in terms of the procedures that we have in place? You talk about structural integrity
Yes.
inspections,
Mhm.
and I wonder who's doing those inspections?
So those inspections are being done by a master plumber or staff under the supervision of a master plumber or a firm that has a permit from the department.
Of health?
Yes.
Okay. And you talk about the board, Article 141,
Yes.
that requires the owners annual reporting of tank inspections.
Mm-hmm.
They're reporting, just reporting, or are they reporting, what about defects? If they found defects, what are they, is there a requirement there for them to
Yes.
repair those defects? Or just
Yes.
report it?
So the previous process was simply a certification that the tank met standards, and that was issued by the firm that inspected it. So the owner would get basically a certificate. of adequacy from the firm that was performing the work. The new process requires a more detailed, direct affirmation of the things that were inspected, things that were inspected were in compliance, and if there were defects, were those defects corrected? And there is an affirmation at the bottom of the report that says the information is being submitted subject to civil and criminal penalties for lying.
So have there been any thought to the idea of master plumbers certifying structural stability of tank structures?
So the master plumber is reviewing the tank itself, yeah, and making a determination as whether is there pitting, is there corrosion, is there rust present, things that need to be fixed.
Any other questions?
One of the penalties in the schedule seemed to be sort of an outlier. It's under 141.07E, and it's failure to clean drinking water tank when required. I mean, that to me seems like a sore thumb. I don't understand. I mean, that one seems to be lumped in with a bunch of other ones about not giving notice about things, or it seems to me to be the big one. I don't know, why was that one set as low as it was? Do you know?
That was sort of a decision from our management based on what we consider to be the relative risk from the failure to clean the water tank. We don't have data to identify a significant risk at this point. It's a preventative measure. So the fine schedule is designed to evaluate similar levels of risk to other health department violations.
Elizabeth Bauer, citizen member. I guess just generally speaking, I was wondering whether, given the apparent complete lack of compliance that exists now, whether this entire penalty schedule is high enough to encourage building owners to get into compliance. I mean, I don't know how expensive it is to do these inspections and then do the appropriate repairs that the
Right.
inspections may reflect, but given the public health concerns, would it be, simply easier for them to take the risk and defer doing these inspections and take the risk of not?
Ms. Nauer's question goes exactly to the same point that I made before, which is we're being asked to come to a decision as to the appropriateness of a fine structure virtually in a vacuum. You can have businesses to whom a $5,000 fine is no more than a nickel to some of us, or other organizations to whom a $5,000 fine could be backbreaking. We don't know. We don't deal with water towers and buildings, and the owners of these folks and have no experience on compliance and what motivates them and so forth, and in general public policy structure. And when we are asked to, and it's not just your agency, this is across the board, when we're asked to pass on these proposals, we're doing so in a virtual vacuum, and that's not really the right way to make public policy.
So I think one way to think about that is that the agency that's presenting you the fine schedule has gone through that deliberative process internally to come up with a fine schedule based on its expertise and its understanding of the industry for what they think is appropriate.
And that's as it should be.
And that's as it should be.
And it should be within the that agency's rules to establish that fine structure. It shouldn't be dumped on us to assume and take on face value that all that should be done to make that analysis was done, and basically treat us like a rubber stamp. I'm not criticizing you, I'm
Yeah, no, I
criticizing
understand, I'm just trying to,
the-
I just
the
want to get a
city
sense
charter,
of how we're
basically.
going to proceed with this. So, right now, I don't know how it works at DCB. Right now, if we came to you with a proposal with no fine schedule, and...
It wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work. So if we adopted a fine schedule in the health code...
Then it's yours, and it is
Then
replaced.
that would work for ECB as well?
That would work.
No, it wouldn't.
That would work in the other tribunals right now. It would not work. It would not work with an e-summons. An e-summons is a summons that's one of the summonses from like 16 different agencies that either by regulation or the ad code or the city charter must go to the Environmental Control Board. When in 1971 they thought the Environmental Control Board was something very different than what it is now. That's how cases are now structured. Eventually there will be one tribunal that, a hearings tribunal that will hear all the cases, whether they're health, taxi, ECB or whatever. The distinction will be if it's right now, the way the charter is structured, if it has to be an e-summons, the difference will be that the appeals process will be different. The appeals process will have to go through the convoluted ECB process rather than, for example, the more straightforward process in the health tribunal or the taxi tribunal. But that's really the only effective difference. And at the end of the exercise, until there are changes to the charter, the only difference will be the appeals process. Everything else will be identical.
So what do you suggest that the agency do now? Do you want us to take it off the table and adopt it as part of our health code?
Right now, I understand this is, for the most part, in the health tribunal. I want to have further discussions with staff of both agencies as to what the issues are. From what I hear, primarily, the main issue has to do with data processing. And going through this entire exercise because there's an issue with data processing that somehow couldn't be figured out or resolved is, I'll restrain my editorializing, but crazy. Especially in light of the fact that that process is being, as we speak, being made the same across the board and being made the same across the board for 26 agencies in the city of New York. I want to dive into this a lot more carefully. I don't want to shoot from the hip and say kill the whole thing or stick it over here or stick it over there. There's a lot of things that have popped up over here today that I have some very, very serious questions about.
So one of the other challenges with...
I would table it.
So I would say one of the other challenges we have with using the health tribunal is I can't serve by U.S. mail from the health tribunal. I have to serve by a certified letter, which is like $7 a pop.
So we pay for it.
No, well, I pay for that because I have to do the service.
Yeah, but if it comes to ECB, I have to pay for it. Which, by the way, is a subject of the next thing on the agenda.
So the way we're proposing this right now is that ECB would not assume any responsibility for the issuing of the summons. They would have no involvement in that whatsoever. That'll all be handled by the department. If we move to the tribunal, we've got two big challenges for a program that's going to roll out in about 2 weeks. One challenge is that we're not going to be able to automatically generate docket numbers for violations that have to be done manually. That's a big chunk of work. The second is that there will have to be a certified letter mailed to every person who's been violated. The certified letter is a complicated thing to manage from a clerical standpoint, and it's expensive. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional cost to the taxpayer by having us stay at the tribunal under the current scheme.
All right, so I understand as of July 1st, you don't have to use certified mail.
As of July 1st, we're going to be able to go mail.
I'm sorry, I'm just a little confused about the timing. What was the February 2016 date that you mentioned?
So owners have 1 year to submit their documentation.
So you wouldn't be issuing these violations until February 2016, by
Yes.
which point presumably things will have changed
A lot.
a lot. So it might be a moot point. Is that?
I mean, potentially,
And I'm just trying to understand.
yeah,
Is that-
the challenge is that we're rolling out IT solutions now. So we would have to basically stop all of our IT solutions now, and then roll that over until the tribunal's data system comes online at some point in the future, and then we would have to figure out how to align it. We're in a position now to align all the IT infrastructure, roll this out, and have it functional now. So it's just a way
That
to...
process can't continue unless we adopt this, approve this, or could it continue under the assumption?
I mean, we could go back and we could try to pull it off the table and see if we can come up with some better IT solutions, but again,
I assume your IT folks have been talking to our IT folks.
my IT folks have been talking with the ECB IT folks, yes.
All right.
Understand how to implement this and make it work and generate the algorithm for this violation type so that we could do this in an automated way.
Okay. Anything else? I move to table this at this time until I get more information to supply to the board and other folks. Is there a second? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor, 7 in favor, 2 abstentions. 8 in favor, including myself. Thank you.
I don't think,
Well, that was a good. I thought that was an editorial comment. We have a proposal coming up having to do with to cure a rather bizarre process I found in connection with some ECB hearings, which is we have a hearing and the respondent is there. The prosecutory, the enforcement agency may or may not be there, but in any event, it's a straightforward, relatively simple case where the hearing officer makes a decision right there, essentially. And we tell the respondent that we're not going to tell you what the decision is. We're going to mail it to you, and you might get it in a week or two. Whereas we could have just as easily have told them to wait outside a few minutes, as is done in some of the other tribunals, such as, for example, the TLC tribunal, where a cab driver comes in for a hearing. He has his hearing, he waits outside, and in a short period of time, a clerk comes over to him or her and hands the respondent the decision. And they walk away knowing whether they have to pay a fine or not, whether they're guilty or not, whether they're suspended or not. For reasons probably lost somewhere in the mysteries and in the fog of space and time, we don't do that with ECB hearings. We mail it. The proposal that is about to be presented essentially allows hearing officers to give the decision, or rather the tribunal to give the decision to the respondent right there. Some cases you can't do that because they're a little more complicated and they require the decision to be reserved because it may require a longer decision to be written. It could involve multiple issues, any number of reasons. In those cases, it's reserved, and the person will get the decision in the mail. Aside from the fact that we have a $1.1 million postal budget, which is also insane in and of itself, it just does not, in my opinion, make sense to keep somebody hanging, deciding trying to figure out what their situation is, walking out the door when we could tell them right there what it is. And that's what's about to be described. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I am James Armstrong, Law Fellow, General Counsel's Office. I am presenting right now a proposed rule that relates to service of decisions and orders. So this was actually first discussed last month, as you may remember. And this rule would specifically say, it would specify that mail or hand delivery of decisions and orders is permissible. And further, it would permit that cease and desist orders are served by regular mail and personal delivery rather than by certified mail. This rule has been certified by Law and Ops. Are there any questions?
I'll just add that somebody sends me a certified letter, I'll be lucky to get it before the weekend, which is when I can get to the post office. And many people ignore, and we know this because we get it back, we get the returns back. Never get to the post office. And one more piece is, if typically I mail you a letter by regular mail, New York City get it within 1 or 2 days. A certified letter, because of the extra handling through the post office, you'll be lucky they attempt delivery within a week. Expense aside, just as a matter of, I think, just plain civility and common sense, I think this is a more rational process. Any questions? I'm big into rational processes. Irrational stuff drives me nuts. No pun intended. Yes.
This would allow for the decisions once they've been determined by the hearing officers, that they would be with both parties, whether it's the agency as well as the respondent themselves, that they would be, the agency representative would be handed the decision also. Is that correct?
At the same time.
Okay.
And it'll be, of course, entered into the mystical IT system.
When Russell Pacuni's the EP, when we discussed this last month, I was under the impression that the agencies would still get their decisions by mail.
Sure.
Yes?
Sure. Unless you want them, you know, otherwise.
No, but that's fine.
And we're certainly open to that, and, you know, probably eventually we'll be doing this electronically anyway.
So just to clarification to Joseph Gregory Fire Department. So when you, piggybacking onto your question about the clarification regarding the decisions being mailed, if it's handed to the agency representative, so you're saying in addition to that, it would also be mailed, or?
If that's what the agency wants. Yeah.
So the period as far as for appeal purposes, would that start the clock ticking upon when it's handed personally to them or from the mailing?
The clock will tick from the moment of service to the respondent, which is, if he's handed it to him personally, that's when the clock starts to tick. If it's mailed, it typically starts to tick. I forgot, I think it's 5 days after the date of mailing, something like that. I'm not sure it's what, basically I think the CPLR says.
So,
Elizabeth Nauris' number, I think the question was if it's for the agency appealing.
Right.
Whether it would, if it was handed to the agency rep at the time of the hearing, would their time for appeal begin at that point or upon 5 days after mailing?
I would think it would begin at the point of service, which is when it was handed to the agency rep.
Okay, I just interject, Elaine Balson, Deputy General Counsel for oath for the purposes of the record. So if you look at the actual proposed rule, it says the decision in order shall be filed with the executive director and served on all parties or their authorized representatives, either personally or by mail. So to answer your question, Joe, I think the agency could opt in or out in which way it wanted to. And then in the appeals rules, it says any party aggrieved by the hearing officer's recommended decision in order within 30 days of service on that same party. So if you were served with the decision in order by hand delivery, it would be 30 days. If we mailed it to you, you would get the extra 35 days, the extra 5 days in the computation of time rule. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so just find to even more. So basically you're saying that the agency representative can say, well, no, I don't want to carry back a whole lot of decisions. I'd rather it be mailed the way, it's been in the past. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to the agency, like you said.
But
I
like,
can't be-
just for the record, that's Amy Slifka.
Yes, so if you want to be served, or at the same time the respondent is served, after the hearing, then you collect your decision and orders. If you don't, they will be mailed to you.
Okay.
Same as the respondent will have
Right.
that same choice, right? They'll be able to stay, or they could be mailed, as it is in the other tribunals now.
Taxi is the
Taxi,
same way.
taxi and
Exactly.
health is the same way.
Yeah, we want to hold the respondent hostage, so he can't leave until we,
Right.
Right.
you get the thing. If he walks out, then we'll mail it to him.
Ronaldo from the Department of Business, I just want to make sure that, so at the end of a hearing, a hearing officer may hand deliver either to respondent or to petitioner a copy of their decision, and that starts the clock, correct?
Correct.
If it's handed.
He'll probably be a clerk, not
No,
the
but-
hearing.
Right.
Right, it'll be a-
Right, okay. If either party refuses the hand deliver method and opt for the mailing to their place of business or home, that clock will begin at the time of mailing to either party or to whomever is getting.
Whoever is getting the mail.
Whoever is getting. So there'll be two clocks.
Yes,
There would be 2
correct,
clocks,
there will
yes.
be 2 clocks,
Yes.
that's correct.
Because that's the way the rules are.
Okay. Don't you think that kind of murks the water for ECD in itself? I mean,
Not really, because if there's a mailing, they'll both be mailed simultaneously, so the clock will be running
I
together.
understand, but
No, in the sense that we will have a database, we will know who is served personally at the time of the hearing, and we will know that their clock started from the time they received it at the tribunal. If it's not there, we know that it was mailed to them because we have the date of
The
mailing.
difference
so we
is
will
5
have-
days, correct?
Yeah.
The difference here is 5 days.
Correct.
I mean, how simple could we have just made it? Just have it start at the time of mailing. If there was mail involved in either, in any of these party decisions, being mailed or hand delivered. This way you wouldn't have, you would just be at the time of decision, 35 days, right? You understand? I'm just
I
saying.
know, but we didn't, and it's an administrative thing, I think we can handle it.
I think we should consider that, just making it, it's 5 day difference. And you didn't have to hire another person to try to figure, I know you're not hiring someone else, but the time for another appeals rep or some appeals attorney to be looking at service, between parties and who, I think it should just be one straight time granted at mailing.
That's something to consider, to make it 35 days across the board or something like that. But what we're doing is we're actually following the civil procedure law and rules of the state of New York. And I'm not too sure we can fudge with that too much. That's something to look at though. Because we may be locked into whatever it is the CPLR says.
We don't anticipate that it will be difficult for the appeals unit staff to be able to calculate the days.
No, not difficult, just another issue, who's time, respondent versus that, and I think it goes into another.
Well, I think the way it happens when you get an appeal, essentially somebody's going to look at the file and for whomever it is who's appealing, and it will be apparent immediately by looking at the file whether it's 30 or 35 days. They don't have to compare it to what the other party's time was. It's just, Joe Blow files an appeal. You have to look up the Joe Blow's case, and it says such and such a date is when the clock starts to run. Does it run or not? And that's it. You have to go through that exercise
Right, you're
regardless.
either counting 30 days or 35 days regardless, so.
I understand what you're saying, but I think it's still going to have to go through the exercise. Anything else? Is there a motion to accept this proposal? Which is essentially the gravamen of which, okay. Were there any abstentions or negative votes? I didn't catch it all. Okay. Unanimous, okay, thank you. Sanitation Department has rules regarding recovery of refrigerants.
So this proposed rule is a response to a Department of Sanitation proposal from last month, and it pertains to the lawful recovery of refrigerants from appliances disposed of by residents. So this proposed rule would amend the ECB sanitation penalty schedule to create penalties for violations of sanitation rules regarding disposal of refrigerants. This rule has been certified by Law and Ops. Are there any questions?
With the same caveat I had with regard to before regarding violation, fine structures. Is there a motion? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in favor and 1 abstention. And it's adopted. Thank you. We now have electronic waste. I'm sorry. Oh,
Sorry.
All right.
I thought you were signaling.
No, I thought he was leaving it, I was like,
Oh.
wait, there's two more.
All right. So now I discuss a final rule which amends the ECB sanitation penalty schedule to create penalties for violations of local law 67, which relates to publicly accessible collection bins. And it also creates a penalty for violation of 16 RCNY 1-04.2, which prohibits the placement of electronic waste out for solid waste or recycling collection. So this rule was published in the City Record on March 13, 2015. And on April 14, 2015, there was a public hearing heard. It's a joint hearing for both final rules we're talking about today, but including this rule. 2 members of the public attended, but no written comments or oral testimony were received for this rule. Are there any questions?
Were the members of the public opposed or in favor of the amendment, by the way?
They didn't say anything.
Oh, they didn't say
Just
anything?
sat there.
Oh, they were just witnesses, okay. All right. It was a slow day in Bedrock. Is there a motion? It's unanimous with 1 abstention. Buildings Department.
Okay, so now this final rule amends ECB's buildings penalty schedule in order, 1, to adequately enforce existing laws and rules, 2, to reflect changes brought about by local law 141, and 3, to reflect ongoing efforts of the Department of Buildings to update violations in the building rules. This too was published in the City Record on March 13, 2015, and at the joint hearing on April 14, 2015, those members attended. There was 1 written comment received. That comment, as well as any relevant details about the hearing, have been provided to the members of the board. Are there any questions?
Hey, Martinez, George, I want you to the comment from National Grid. It seems relating to damage for damaging a tree. Is any definition of what constitutes damage? Because the commenter seems to infer that minor damage should not be something that should be official violation.
I might defer on this question.
I mean, the comment from National Grid is sort of weird, because if you look at the actual section, it says that you've damaged the tree without having a permit, but their comment says that they always have an arborist and they always get a permit. So I was not really sure why they were making that comment.
Yeah, Tom Spanier says, remember, there's another peculiar thing, which is, I believe it said something like, there's gonna be damage, we're gonna damage these trees anyway, that's why we have an arm. I think that was in there as well, I'm not printing it out.
Right, I mean, basically what they
So
were
it was a
saying.
peculiar letter, I mean, it said, we're gonna make a mess, but we're gonna take care of it, I think.
And we're not necessarily hurting the tree.
That's
But
right.
that, of course, is something that they could allege at a hearing and could be decided at a hearing. And we do this all the time with parks violations, by the way.
And I think the related point that Tom was alluding to was that if they know they're going to potentially damage a tree, they know that they need to get a permit.
That's right, yeah.
So it's not as though they're being penalized, for something that they didn't foresee. So it's easy enough for them to just get the permit.
It's a very inartful letter, I think, to say the least. I've got another possible interpretation that they may be asking for a graduated penalty schedule or mitigation schedule or God knows what. But it's a very and they didn't bring a human being in to testify, right? They just sent a letter.
Yeah,
So maybe this is in the nature of, the maximum penalty is $5,000, I believe. And we are an international multi-billion-dollar corporation, and we're not too concerned about it one way or the other?
Actually,
I don't
the
know.
penalty, the hearing penalty is $800. So-
Right. I don't,
On the mitigation question, I would give it over to Ronaldo, but I think,
Couldn't that be part of the permit conditions? I mean, I don't know how these permits work, but if they get a permit, wouldn't whatever mitigation is required be built into the conditions of the permit?
Well, Ronald Hinton, Department of Buildings. Well, the permit is actually not Department of Buildings permit. It's actually from the city planning, Department of City Planning. It is built in our code because we enforce the zoning resolution. So if they were to get a permit, there would not be a violation. So there is no issue there with mitigation. If a mitigation, the reason why there's no this violation is not mitigatable is because there is really, and if you think about it, the majority of these violations are going to be for homeowners or businesses that remove trees in these natural districts. Remove them, not necessarily, accidentally chop the trunk of it.
Or not necessarily accidentally cut around the entire bark, so
Right,
you wind
so
up
that-
killing the tree and then expect the city to come and take it away because it's a dead tree, which happens a lot.
Correct. And so mitigation, not because you have to, in order to mitigation, to mitigate that issue, that problem, you have to go back to the city planning and work out a solution to how you're going to replace that tree. So it's not, and the mitigation here that they're talking about is not on penalty, they're talking about on fixing the problem. I think that's what I got from the letter.
But they could work that out in
They can work it out.
advance.
Yes, it's
as
always
part of
worked
the
out in
permit
advance,
process.
especially for these people. But if any homeowner should do that, they would have to go back to the Department of City Planning and get a permit, basically, to undo the damage that they did, or permission to undo the damage. And that's how we would assess or approve the correction of that violation.
Make a donation to the Million Trees Fund and buy a new tree. Anything else? Discussion or whatever? Is there a motion? It's unanimous with one abstention. From the appropriate agency. Better.
Thank you.
And our time.
Okay, Russell Picunes, the DEP. This month, DEP has 10 requests for the board to issue cease and desist orders. These 10 requests are all under the air code for failing to renew operating certificates. And in each of these 10 cases, the building has an expired operating certificate to use number 6 fuel oil, the use of which will be prohibited as of June 30th. Since these respondents have all been adjudicated in violation for failing to renew their certificates and have not complied with the order in the decision to come into compliance, DEP is asking the board to issue orders to cease and desist in these 10 cases.
Questions? Is there a motion? It's unanimous in favor with one abstention.
Okay, and DEP has 28 requests for cease and desist orders for failing to install backflow prevention devices. In each of these cases, the DEP commissioner's order to install was not complied with. A notice of violation was issued. That NOV has been adjudicated in violation, either in person or by default. The respondents continue to be in violation for not installing the required device, and DEP is therefore requesting that the board issue cease and desist orders in these 28 cases.
Is there a motion? Again, it's approved with one abstention.
Yep, thank you.
It's amazing to me how many people have trouble with backflow prevention. Is there a motion to go into an executive session to go over? Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. Missed one at the bottom of the line. Receiving reports.
Good morning, Board. I am Corson Assistant director for ECB. We have 34 pursuing reports today, and they're all pretty ordinary, except for the final one, which I will go into detail about. It's a noise case, and the hearing officer in that case has recommended that the equipment be sealed. So first we have 25 backflow cases. In 22 of those cases, the hearing officers recommended that there be no sealing given the respondent's compliance. And in the 3 remaining cases, the hearing officers also recommended, the hearing officers recommended that the CMP order be discontinued. And the reasons for those recommendations are: in one case, the respondent is deceased. In the second case, the premises has been demolished. And in the third case, a recent DEP inspection showed that the site of premises is vacant. Any questions on the 25 backflow cases?
I have a question procedurally. When we rescind it because this respondent is deceased, does DEP then take it up again?
Yeah, I know which one this is because I just got an email about it yesterday, I think. Yeah, the respondent on this one, we would have to start over with the new, whoever the new building owner is, by issuing them an order to install the device. If they comply with that, fine, and never comes back to ECB again. If the new owner doesn't comply, then we would have to issue a new NOV.
That makes sense.
The next case is a sewer code case. And in this case, the hearing officer recommended that the CMP order be discontinued because a recent inspection had shown that the cited restaurant had come into compliance. Any questions on that? Okay, the next cases are air code cases. There are 5 of those. In the pre-sealing report, the hearing officers also recommended that no further action was necessary. Given the respondent's compliance, the respondents were able to show at the hearing that they had obtained the operating certificates that were needed. Any questions? Okay, the noise code cases, we have 3 of those. In 2 of those cases, the respondents were able to provide proof of work done on the equipment to bring it into compliance. And based on that evidence, the hearing officers recommended that DEP re-inspect the equipment and that the equipment remain unsealed if the initial re-inspection shows no violation and further re-inspections show no violation for 180 days. And the final noise case is the one that I mentioned where the hearing officer has recommended that the equipment be sealed. This is a restaurant located at 228 West 18th Street in Manhattan, and the equipment involves a kitchen exhaust fan. This goes back to 2013 when DEP issued a notice of violation to the respondent for operating an exhaust fan in excess of 42 decibels. At that time, the inspector had noted that readings taken from an open window in the complainant's 3 feet from an open window in the complainant's apartment showed that there was a total decibel level of 67, an ambient decibel level of 56, and that made a source level of 67. Respondent failed to appear for the hearing, and the case went to default. There were 3 subsequent notices of violations issued regarding this equipment, and in all cases, the respondent again failed to appear and default orders were issued. On February 26, 2014, the board issued a cease and desist order directing the respondent to appear for a pre-sealing hearing to show good cause why the equipment should not be sealed. At the initial March 17th pre-sealing hearing, the respondent's representative stated that the respondent had sold the restaurant. The case was adjourned for the respondent to provide evidence that the restaurant had been sold. It was adjourned 2 more times for the same reason. Finally, at the pre-sealing hearing on April 21st, the representative came in and said that he had been informed that the new owner of the restaurant is El Cocotero Inc. Now, the cease and desist order had been issued to Marana's Cafe Inc. DBA El Cocotero. When the only evidence that the representative presented with respect to this alleged change in ownership was a cell phone photograph of a New York State Department of Taxation and Finance Certificate of Authority that's addressed to El Cocotero Inc., Restaurant Solutions NYC, 75 Maiden Lane, which is not even the address of the restaurant in question. The DEP representative at the hearing recommended sealing of the kitchen exhaust because the respondent had failed to present adequate evidence of the change in ownership and had failed to provide anything to show that the equipment was being repaired or replaced. The hearing officer agrees with the DEP representative's recommendation to seal the equipment immediately.
Any questions?
Elizabeth Nauer, or, I'm on the record, sorry. We are on
Yes.
Elizabeth Nauer, citizen member. So has there been any attempt to try to determine whether El Cocotero Inc. is in fact a different entity and that they possibly don't have awareness of these violations prior to sealing?
If I'm allowed to, there are two different corporations at the time of the hearing. That was looked up. The restaurant has always been called El Cocotero, apparently has been for about 20 years. And apparently the gentleman who owns the restaurant is a very well-known Venezuelan culinary figure. And he, as of February, I believe, was quoted in a newspaper article where he identified himself as being the owner of the restaurant. So there may have been a corporate name change, but there does not appear to have been an actual change in the ownership of the restaurant.
What's the location of this restaurant? What's the location?
228 West 18th Street.
I think the documents, DBA on it, tells the tale. It's the same entity for all practical purposes. In any case. Any discussion or other questions? Is there a motion to accept? It's unanimous with one exception, one abstention. Thank you. Now I'll ask if there's a motion to go into executive session. And it's unanimous with one executive session. Is there a motion, public session, I'm sorry. Is there, number one, a motion to adopt the personnel question, which is to name me the executive director of ECB? All signify aye. Thank you. That is unanimous. We have two questions on appeal to determine. One is New York State Racing Association, and the other one is New York City versus Gatling. The issues are essentially the same. And the question is whether we will maintain that the New York City Fire Code is applicable to inspections at the racetracks. If everyone concurs on option A that they are applicable, then that will be the decision. If there are any, if we don't have a majority, then we'll discuss whether or not some other course of action is appropriate. So I call the question as to whether or not the New York City Fire Code should be applicable to in those two cases.
Therefore, adopting the alternative two.
Right.
Correct. All in favor? It's unanimous with one abstention and two abstentions, and I'm not sure how you do it.
And I'm voting
In the negative?
in the negative.
In one vote in the negative. Where's those one? Well, he's not present. Thank you very much.
We can vote on the recommendations also.
Oh, I'm sorry. On the appeals recommendations, is there a motion to adopt the recommendations? and it appears to be unanimous. Thank you very much. Yeah. Right. Oh, hold on. I'll write a note for you, do it. Sorry about that. Thank you very much for coming. Sorry, got a little long-winded. Some of what happened today reflects, I think, what I was complaining about, that some agencies view us as a threat. Thank you.